right, here we go. We've got another awesome episode for you guys today. And our guest today is someone that I was thinking back, I'm surprised we haven't had this guy on sooner because he's been on all of our other podcasts way sooner than this, but that's because he's so busy. We have speaker, author, communication expert, Dwight Taylor Sr. What's going on, man?
What's going on, big dog? Appreciate you for having me on here. Where's Deb at?
That's a good, man, I ask myself, I don't want to go down this road, but Dwight asked, I ask myself that every day, man. Every week when I do this podcast solo, I'm like, man, I don't even know why I call her co-host anymore. You know what I'm saying? Like she's part of the show, but is she really,
And here's the thing, right? We're not here to judge. You feel me?
Look at that. See, Deb would have made Deb's day. Yeah. Guess what, Deb? You're not here to experience it. So.
Yeah, man.
That's awesome, man. But hey, we always love having you on, man. And I think I reached out to you a long time ago. But I think at that point, time-wise, it wasn't going to work out for either one of us. Yeah. But I'm still super thankful that I reached out to you because one of our awesome guests, Casey Morris, we were able to connect with her because of you. And she was incredible hearing her story. That was awesome. So even when you're not on the show, man, you're still making connections for us and helping us get more connected. So we appreciate you for that, man.
Oh, man, I appreciate that. And, thinking about just what your show is about and connection, I'm big on connection, right? One of the things that my wife and I talked about a little bit ago was I asked her, I said, what do you think is my greatest gift? And I'm thinking she's going to say communication. That's what I'm thinking.
Sure.
She said connecting people. She was like, that's the thing that you do without thinking about it. That's the thing that you do that also brings you the most joy. You like connecting people to either other dope people or dope stuff. And so, I'm just grateful to be able to connect those people. You had my guy Josh on here too, Sapansky. You had him on here as well.
Yeah.
So that's my young guy. He does a lot of video stuff for me. We got some great video content coming out very soon for students. But man, I just love connecting people with dope people, and you all are dope.
We appreciate that, man. Yeah, that's funny. Yeah, I kind of forgot about that. But yeah, I was connected with him because I saw some of the amazing work he was doing with you. So we reached out to him. And also not this podcast, but my other podcast, which you'll also be on. So if you guys want to check out Home Team Sack, Dwight will be on tomorrow. But I got connected with Coach JT Roberts as well. And that was an indirect connection, but I realized that you were following him. It's like, well, if Dwight's following him, he must be a good dude. And sure enough, he was an amazing guest. So,
man, shout out to my man, Coach JT with 94 Feet with Coach JT. I've been knowing JT since 2015. And we didn't have a very good relationship. Well, we may have had a very good relationship. I didn't have a good relationship with him because we coached against each other with middle school. So he coached at Sutter Middle School, and I coached at Einstein, and we lost to him in the championship. And so it was a lot going on. But that's my guy, man. I love him so much.
He's a good dude. It's actually funny that you bring up basketball and you coaching at Einstein, because usually we kick off the show by letting everybody know how we're connecting with our guests. And the funny thing is, I had heard you on some, I knew of you as an artist, a musician, a rapper. I heard you on a couple of songs, and then I went to a concert here in Sacramento. I can't remember which concert it was, but you were on stage. I'm like, oh yeah, I know that guy. It's pretty cool. I didn't realize you were local though at that point. And I went to watch one of my guys who I used to kind of mentor at Oak Ridge Elementary School when I was working with B Change and all that. And he was playing for, I forgot which school he was playing for, but he was playing against Einstein. And I was there with my wife, and she saw you across the way. And she's like, hey, isn't that the guy that we just saw at this concert? I'm like, yeah, I think it is. And then sure enough, you start getting involved with Character Combine, Kevin Bracey, all these different connections. And then, now we have you on our podcast. So it's funny you brought up the basketball thing, man, because that's kind of the first time we made the connection with you being here in Sacramento. But that's kind of how we know you, man. But anyways, enough about that, dude. Like, we want to talk about everything you have going on. I mean, it seems like last time we spoke, you were incredibly busy. Congrats as well. You're a grandpa now, man.
I am a grandfather now. Yes, man.
Congrats, man.
Thank you, brother. Thank you so much, man. My beautiful granddaughter, 7. She's just a joy. I don't even have words to describe how I feel about her. And you know me, like my people who rock with me, they know me. I put words together very easily, and I love words, but I haven't even come up with the word to describe how she makes me feel. And she's only been here for about a little over a month.
Wow, that's crazy.
Yeah, man.
It's, man. And you had to be like the coolest grandpa ever, dude. Like,
1,000%.
You know what I'm saying? Like, you're a speaker, you're a musician, you do all this stuff. It's like, they probably don't even believe you're a grandpa.
They don't. People never believe it when I tell them, which is cool, right? Because
Yeah.
I'm about to share a little bit of something because we have history.
Yeah.
So I recently turned 40 in
Okay.
January. And so I was already in the mindset of, man, I'm getting older, right? And then a little over a month later, I have my granddaughter, and it just made me feel like, wait a minute, I thought I was old, but I'm young when it comes to being a grandfather. So I'm a young man again. And yeah, so a lot of people don't believe that I'm old as I am, or they don't believe that I'm a grandfather, but I'm a grandfather, and I'm literally every single moment of the day stepping into that role. Like I love it because of who my grandfather was for me. So
I was going to say, I know
yeah,
that's
man.
something we talk about every time because it has to be talked about and it has to be
Yeah.
mentioned. Your grandfather
Yeah.
having such an amazing impact on your life. I have to ask though, man. So do you have a special like grandpa name? What's
G Paul.
G-Paw? I like that.
Yeah,
I
man.
like that a lot. Nice, man.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, congrats to you and your family. That's an
Thank you,
awesome.
man.
I've seen some of the pictures and it's beautiful, man. So
Yeah.
love seeing that. But like, what's going on? Let's just kind of open it up, man. Like, what's going on with you? Because you have a ton of stuff going on. Like,
Yeah,
where do you want to start?
Shoot. I guess I can start with bringing people up to speed
Yeah.
just with what's been going on in the last, I say 3 months, man. It's been some crazy stuff, right? So I got recognized a few months ago by the Golden State Warriors.
Yeah.
On the center court for some of the work that I do. I got a jersey from them for the work that I do in the community. And on the back of that jersey, it has my last name, which is crazy to me, but it also is a great representation to the man we were just talking about, which is my grandfather. So on the back of my jersey, it says Taylor Sr. Well, he's Wendell Taylor Sr. I'm Dwight Taylor Sr. So the Taylor Sr. is also representative of him as well. And so that's been big. Just grateful for what the Warriors, are doing in the community and then recognizing me. I'm also doing some stuff with Junior Achievement, which is local out here. I mean, Junior Achievement is everywhere, but Junior Achievement Sacramento, been able to do some stuff with them with JA Inspire, doing some stuff with Solano County Juvenile Hall. So I really just have my hands in multiple things, but it all comes down to what I'm passionate about. And I'm passionate about seeing people become the very best version of themselves every moment, second, minute, hour of every day, every week, every month, every year for the rest of their lives. And so I'm just grateful for all those things. And the last piece, which I believe has a lot to do with this podcast that I'm on right now with you, is I'm really pushing into this effective communication space.
Yeah.
And really helping people understand how powerful, important, and impactful effective communication is. And so, yeah, man, we got a lot going on, and I'll share a little bit later on in the show, something especially for your listeners. But yeah, man, effective communication can change any situation, and that's the narrative that I'm pushing.
Man, 100%, man, 100%. Like I majored in communications at Sac State, and I just love it, man. And I know people joke about the communications major all the time. People make jokes about that, and yeah, I understand why, but at the same time, it's funny. Like the people that make those jokes, communication should be one of the easiest things, right? It can be simple. We read books about it. We listen to podcasts about just the 1, 2, 3 of how you do communication effectively. But then how many times do we see relationships fall apart, friendships break up? You have business partners having differences of opinions, and they can't figure it out, and the business falls apart. Like it's an interesting thing because it's like you said, it's key to everything. It doesn't matter whether it's family, friends, business. I mean, even as we're driving, right? Like you have turn signals because you're trying to communicate with something else without words. Like you can't escape it. You can't escape it. And so, I mean, I love the message that you have, and I love what you're doing. Let me ask you this. I'm sure you work with people of all ages, from kids to people in corporate businesses. What would you say is the most difficult, and it's hard to generalize, but which group would you say has the most difficult time effectively communicating?
Adults.
Yeah, I had a feeling, but why is that? I want to hear from the professional.
Adults have the hardest time, in my perspective, communicating effectively. They don't have a hard time communicating, but they have a hard time communicating effectively because it was never properly taught to them.
Yeah.
If you think about us in school, we're taught math, science, history, English from K all the way to 12th. Like these things are repetitive. Nobody is teaching effective communication from kindergarten to 12th explicitly. Now, there may be some listening things that we learn. There may be some speaking properly that we learn along the way. But the reality is nobody's teaching this as something that's core and that's necessary and needed every single day. And so when you get to become an adult like myself, if you haven't been taught these things, then you just assume that what you're doing is correct. So if you assume that what you're doing is correct, and then someone comes along and tries to change that perspective that you have about your correctness, it's very hard to unlearn something, to then learn something. Where with young people, if I can catch them kindergarten, first grade, second grade, third grade, fourth grade, fifth grade, even up to, I say, middle school and high school, if I can catch them at some point between K through 12 and start teaching them these concepts about effective communication, it's much easier for them because they're still in their process of just learning the best way to go about things. They're learning the most efficient and effective ways to go about things. So it's not about me helping them unlearn something so much as it is just teaching them something and helping them learn something. Where adults, that unlearning process it's a tough one, especially when you don't want to be challenged.
Right.
You know?
Oh, 100%. Well, because I mean, I'm sure in a lot of those conversations, it comes off to them as though, like, you're saying I'm wrong, and so then your ego gets involved, right?
Right.
Like gets involved, and
yeah, man.
you're not even aware or able or willing to hear what, you know, the actual problem could be. You're more concerned about like I can't possibly be wrong. Like I've talked to on our other podcast about this, like failure, right? Or making excuses. Like we're more willing to make an excuse for something and look like from every angle and try to figure out why it wasn't our fault, rather than just owning up to it and communicating that to everybody's like, hey, I messed up. I screwed up here. Let's work on fixing this. Like we would rather just figure out all the reasons why it wasn't our fault and communicate those, like, you know, every excuse in the book to say, you know, this is why I'm not to blame. And it's wild, man. It's wild. Now imagine that when you're working with kids though, I mean, obviously you've been speaking for quite a few years now and communicating for quite a few years. Social media has always been around, but at this point, I mean, it's at like an all-time high with, you know, how we can communicate through social media, how much we spend, you know, how much time we spend on social media. How do you, like, what's that like dealing with that when you're dealing with young people and teaching them how to communicate? Because I imagine it can be a great tool, but at the same time, it could also be a massive detriment to their ability to communicate. So how do you deal with that?
I start with the very thing I start with anybody else. So if it's an adult or if it's a kid, is what do we want to communicate and why do we want to communicate it? Yeah. That's really what it comes down to. It's not rocket science. It's what message are you attempting to communicate? And then why do you want to communicate that message? And when people slow down enough, whether it's social media with kids or just conversation, or we're in the store and someone maybe cuts in front of us in the line. If we just slow down enough and ask, what do I want to communicate in this moment?
Right.
Okay. And then why do I want to communicate it? So I might want to communicate frustration, right? If I'm a kid and maybe I'm getting picked on, or maybe things just aren't going my way, or maybe my teacher is just getting on my nerves. I may want to communicate, right, frustration, and that's the what. But then I need to think about, why do I want to communicate this? And maybe I find a great reason to communicate why. Now the next part is, how will I do that effectively? Right? Because there's an effective way to do something and also an ineffective way. And one of the things that I teach is, one of the easiest things that we can do to communicate is start with the who, what, when, where, why, and how, the 5 W's and the H. And if we can take ourselves through that before we even articulate or share or send a message to someone else, we'll have a greater opportunity to be as effective and as efficient as we can be if we didn't do it, right? Because if we don't do those things, then we're just pretty much reacting and we're going with whatever feels best. Now, the reality is, if we go with what feels best and that was the intended outcome, phenomenal. Then you've communicated effectively. Yep. You've communicated exactly what you wanted to get across. But most of the time, nobody is taking a pause and taking a breather or taking a second to think about not only what do I want to communicate, but how will this impact the person or the audience that I'm communicating with? Yep. And so when it comes back to, let's bring it back to what you asked me with these young people that are communicating via social media, I really have them slow down and knowing that communicating on social media is interpersonal, I have them slow down to intrapersonal. And intrapersonal just means, let's start with the communication that you're having within yourself. Let's start with your self-talk. What are we saying to ourselves about this situation? What are we saying to ourselves about our emotions? What are we saying to ourselves about our feelings? What are we saying to ourselves? Because what comes out comes directly from what's already in us. And so when it comes to young people with social media, young people at school, young people in different type of interactions and relationships, or adults, let's start with the intrapersonal, because that intrapersonal is always going to be reflected externally.
Right. And I imagine this is like a huge, huge thing for teachers and administrators when they're hearing about what you're offering, your program. I mean, even like your book, right? Like everything that you're using to communicate. Because I mean, really, you're communicating in a ton of different ways. I mean, obviously you have these podcasts that you're going on, you have your own speaking career, you have your books. But I imagine when they hear this message of effective communication, I imagine that the teachers and admin must just love this, because their whole day is communicating with these students. And I mean, you see it all the time, right? Online, there's a fight here at a basketball game. There's a fight over here during the middle of school, fights breaking out everywhere, or maybe just not fights, but just they're not able to connect with their students. Like how much like positive feedback have you received from schools and teachers and admin when it comes to this idea of effective communication?
I get a lot of positive feedback, but I'm gonna stop there. And I'm gonna say this, I also get pushback. Why? Because the very thing that we talked about in the beginning, adults already feel like they know how to communicate. And so they feel like they're already teaching students how to effectively communicate.
Sure.
So it's still that piece, right? There's a group of people who just want to be challenged and want to learn and feel like, hey, I may know a lot, but I don't know it all. So Dwight, come teach me so that you can teach our students, or I can teach our students. But then you have that other sector of adults who, based off of what we shared already, they're like, I communicate all the time. Why do I need someone to teach me? And why do I need you to come in here and teach our students when I'm teaching them every moment, second, minute, hour of the day? But when they do give me the chance to just share just a brief piece that I've already shared with you and your audience today, the light bulb comes on and they're like, oh, I never thought of it like that. I never thought about intrapersonal communication. I never thought about how important our self-talk is. I never thought about what's in me eventually comes out of me. I never thought about the idea of listening comprehensively, not to react, but in order to respond. So when they give me the opportunity, which is becoming more frequently because the word is getting around that, hey, this is something that is not only needed for adults, but what happens if we can get this into our students early? Life looks different. The world looks different. And those are facts. That's not debatable. Then they become more open to, the message that I'm giving.
Yeah, and it seems like that would make sense, because I always look at it in terms of when it comes to improving ourselves. I always look at it, man, I'm a sports minded guy. Love sports. So I'm always thinking in that in terms like, that when it comes to like, look at LeBron, look at Tom Brady, these guys who have competed at the highest level for so long.
Yeah.
If they had that mindset where they're like, well, I know how to play football. I know how to play basketball. Like I don't need to learn anymore after year 10. They probably wouldn't be playing as long as they have, because that learning would have stopped. So I feel like even in situations, whether it be teachers or people maybe in the corporate setting, if they kind of switch their mindset and say, hey, I know a lot. I've been doing this teaching thing for a long time, but maybe this guy Dwight has something that I can add to my skill set to help me become even more effective, or help me prolong how effective I am for the rest of my career. I don't know. I think it's, if we looked at things more like that, it seems like it makes more sense, at least to me. You know what I mean?
And let me say this, you hit the nail on the head. That happens because here's how I help that to happen. We go into, okay, I hear what you're saying. Let's talk about intrapersonal. Well, when I say intrapersonal, most people have not even thought about what intrapersonal communication is. So now they're intrigued. They're like, what is that? But then the very things that are going through their mind for why they don't need me is their self-talk. And so once we start talking about intrapersonal communication, I start asking questions. What is your self-talk saying about what I'm presenting to you right now? And then that's when you get the truth, the honesty, the authenticity, and every bit of what you just said for why they would push back begins to come out. And now when they begin to hear, like literally hear what they're saying, it changes.
Sure.
Because they truly don't want to be the people who are the know-it-alls, or who feel like they have no more growth that they can get to, or become greater in their communication style, or whatever it may be, especially when it comes to connecting with young people, or connecting with family, or connecting with colleagues. But it just takes me to ask some curious, creative, and quality questions to get them to that point of them hearing themselves, and then understanding that, oh, shoot, maybe this is something that I need, and maybe it's something that could be beneficial, not just here with my students, but also in my personal life. So yeah, I just tell people, just give me 5 minutes. Give me 5 minutes to ask some questions, and we'll get to the bottom of whether or not you need to grow in this area or not. So yeah, man.
That's awesome. Well, I love to hear that the word's spreading, and that you're getting that message out there, because, it's just one of those things where it's not like, you're looking at a very specific thing. You're like teaching people how to, invest. You're teaching people how to train for a specific sport. You're talking about communication. Yeah. So it's a very specific thing, but at the same time, it applies, like I said earlier, it applies to every aspect of life. And so it sounds like the stuff that you're doing, I mean, you obviously might kind of focus more on the schools and students and teachers. Obviously you probably do corporate stuff too. I mean, do you ever get people that are just like, hey, I work a 9 to 5, but I want to learn how to communicate better with my family. Like, I want to communicate better with my kids, my husband, my wife. Like, do you get people that reach out to you about how to communicate better in those settings?
Every single day.
Yeah.
Every single day. Like, I get people to reach out to me about this more than my public speaking, more than my books, more than what I do with young men or adult men in my real manhood. I get people reaching out to me daily about, how do I communicate more effectively? Because here's the thing. I believe that better communicators equal better relationships. We're in relationship with people every single day. It doesn't matter where we go. Like, relationships are the currency of life, period. And so if we have personal relationships or professional relationships, and we can break those down to however we want to break those down, but we're always in relationship with somebody. We're always in an interaction with someone, even if that someone ends up being ourselves, right? Like, we're always we're always talking to ourselves. Even if we don't speak it out loud, it's always going on in here. And so people are always reaching out and like, hey, I want to have a better relationship with my husband or my wife or my partner. I want to have a better relationship with here's what I get a lot. I get a lot of people over 40 who say to me this: I desire to have a better relationship with my parents. Right. So some of their parents, if they're 40, some of their parents are in their 70s or even 80s, and they didn't have a great relationship when they were younger with their parents. And so they're like, I want to have a better relationship. And so those are a lot of the people that I work a lot with on an individual basis when it comes to family structure. But then you have the parents who want to have a better relationship with their kids, or you have an adult who wants to have a better relationship with their siblings. And I'm like, effective communication is the foundation of all healthy relationships. I'm gonna say that again. Effective communication is the foundation of all healthy relationships. If you want to have a healthy relationship, then you must communicate effectively. Here's the problem, Josh. Most people, when they hear me say communication, they think speaking.
Yeah.
Sure. That's what they think, especially coming from me, because I'm a public speaker.
Right.
But I let them know that that's a small percentage of it. Like, speaking, or even being the sender. So like, that could be a text message, that could be an email. Even being the sender of a message is a very small piece. The biggest piece, right? The biggest piece is being the receiver. The biggest piece is being the listener. Right. So when I talk about effective communication, I'm talking about listening with your ears, but also listening with your eyes, right? What are we observing? People are communicating all the time. Right now, I'm looking at you on this platform, and you're nodding your head. So that could be communicating to me that you're tracking with me. That could be communicating to me that you possibly are agreeing. That could just be communicating that you're hearing what I'm saying. Here's the crazy thing. I just named 3 different things. I have no clue what your head nodding means. It's now left up to interpretation. Here's the best way for me to find out, Josh. The best way for me to find out is go, Josh, what does your head nodding mean when I'm speaking?
Right. And I'm with you. I'm tracking with you. I'm following you.
There we go.
Yeah.
There we go. And so that's one of the big things that I teach is yes, effective communication is definitely about speaking, definitely about you being the sender, but it's more so about you listening and asking quality questions, responding well, so that you can do your part to make this communication scenario effective and healthy and better. So, yeah, man.
Yeah, that's interesting. I feel like, especially over the years, I feel like that idea of, hey, you've got to be a good listener to be a good communicator. Sometimes I feel like that's been said so much by people that it becomes a cliche when it's really not, because
Right.
people suck at it.
Right.
Right. Like myself included. I'm not the best listener sometimes, which is horrible because I have a podcast and having conversations with people every week. But you know, like I think we're all guilty of it, but it can't be overstated. Like I love that you said that, because it's something that's so crucial to how we communicate. And like you said, communication is not one of those things where like you and I are having a conversation. This is like a living, breathing thing. It's not like I'm going to take a video of what you say and then watch it on my own time, break it down, and then respond to you. I have to constantly look at the cues, look at, you know what I'm saying? It's like it's a weird thing when you really look at it, you know. Go ahead.
Let me say this. You just said something that my wife and I have been talking about. Effective communication means that you have to be present.
Yeah.
And here's the thing, being present is super difficult, especially if it's not a muscle that you've been working on constantly. A lot of people, especially adults, but even some of our young people now, you know, I'm the father of 3. My oldest son is about to be 20. My youngest son just turned 19, and my beautiful baby girl is 11. And I watch them, and sometimes they're not present. Sometimes they're focused on what they're focused on. So they may be present, like in the room, their presence is there, but they may not be emotionally present. They might not be mentally present, right? They might not even be listening or paying attention. Same goes for myself. There's days where I'm downstairs in the family room with all my family, and my presence is there physically.
Yeah.
But I'm thinking about this podcast. I'm thinking about what value I'm going to add to your listeners today. I'm thinking about what book I'm going to write next, or, you know, anything that I'm working on. And so it's all about being present. It's about being in the moment and responding well to what's going on in that moment. And you can't respond well to something if you're not present for it, period.
Right.
Right. Because I could miss a whole bunch of stuff if I'm only sitting here thinking about what I want to say. I may miss some nuggets that can be super beneficial, not just to me, but also to my family. And so I want to make sure that I'm present as often as possible. And so that's one thing that when I'm working with people, especially high level leaders, right? I work with a few corporations. I won't say their names at the moment, but I work with a few corporations. If you've seen my Instagram, which is Dwight Taylor SR, you know some of the corporations that I work with, but I'm working with some executive directors in these high level corporations. And this is one of the big things that we work on, is just being present. They're like, how do I become a better leader? Be present. How do I become a better communicator? Be present. How do I become a better manager? Be present. Just be present. Be present in that moment. Listen to what's going on, observe what's going on, and then decide the best response to that situation. Yeah. And sometimes the best response is, can you repeat that? Because I didn't fully get it. Yeah. Or the best response is, did I hear you say? And then you reiterate what you heard, but you have to be present.
Yeah. Well, I imagine that's because you do work with some people, and you yourself are a driven, like highly motivated person. Yeah. That's got to be the most challenging group, not to work with, but to get that message across to you, the being present, because like you said, part of the reason why those people are great leaders and successful is because they have this mindset of like constantly grinding.
Yeah.
Like, they can stay up at, until 3 a.m. and wake up at 5 because their motor and their mind works that way. But the challenge becomes being present. And so I imagine that would be a really interesting conversation to have with leaders, especially the higher levels, because I would almost bet that all of them have that challenge where being present is probably the most difficult thing, because of like they just can't turn it off. They can't turn it off. But the ironic part is, like you said, when they're present, everything else will grow and you'll become a better leader, but you got to be able to do it. And that's tough for people.
It is. Again, it's tough now, right? So It's tough now. It will not be tough in 10 years, Josh, because between myself and now knowing that you have a degree in communications, I'm about to bring you along this trip with me. This is going to be something that kids right now are going to know in 10 years, right? So your fifth grader who's 10 will be 20. And now it looks different. Your senior in high school who's 17, 18, 19 is going to be 27, 28, 29. The graduating class of this year in college, they're going to be 10 years older. So yeah, it might be difficult now, but it's doable now, but it will not be difficult, and it will not look the same in 10 years, because this is something that I'm truly on a mission to spread.
Yeah.
We're always communicating.
All the time.
We're always communicating. And here's the thing. Your podcast is called Connectable, right? Yeah. There's no connection without communication. Right. You can't connect with someone without communicating. And somebody might say, oh, well, if I don't say anything, well, you're communicating. Your facial expression is communicating. Your body language is communicating. What you're wearing is communicating, which is why I'm wearing my Dominate Your Day shirt, right? I want to communicate to people to dominate their day. I also want to communicate to people that I have a book, right? So I'm being very intentional about what I'm communicating, because I want to connect with people on a certain level. And you are a high level communicator as well, but you also understand that in order to connect at a high level, we must be able to communicate at a high level. So,
right.
Yeah, man.
I have a couple of questions. I don't want to forget. Hold on. Let me write one down. Let me write one down real quick. Because I wanted to go back and circle back to something you said. About, some of the people that reach out to you are people that maybe want to learn how to communicate better with their loved ones, and they're older as far as age goes. It's funny that you say that, because our guest, who we just released the episode today, Deborah Stevens Peebles, and she's the wife of Courtney Orlando. I don't know if anybody's a music fan, but she's wrote a book called Letter to My Son. And so it's all about connecting with your kids and writing letters and giving them something tangible that they can take with them, that shares your wisdom, your encouragement, your life story. Yeah. And that was one of the things that she mentioned, was that some of the people that have reached out to her since she released this book are people that are in their 40s and 50s that say, hey, I want to learn how to communicate better. So how do I write this letter to my kids who I haven't had the best relationship with? And they're older, so their kids might be, have their own families and their grandparents now, but there's that desire inside of them. So it's interesting that, 2 podcasts back to back, this idea has come up where, there's this thing that connects with people at an older age, where I don't know if there's like a regret that kicks in. I don't know if there's hey, before I get too far down the road, let me try to salvage this relationship and make it better with better communication. I just wanted to bring that up, man. That's really interesting that's the case, and it's happened 2 episodes in a row.
Yeah, and I think it's a mixture of all of it, right? It could be, sure, I'm just now seeing that I don't have a great relationship with the people I want to have a great relationship with, or it could be, I know that I'm going to regret if I don't have this relationship. Yeah. Either way, I believe is a great starting point, especially if you're open to learning, if you're open to growing, if you're open to evolving, if you're open to just becoming a better version of yourself, and not just for the sake of you, but for the sake of the other people that you desire to have a greater connection with and more healthier relationships with. So that's super dope. You said Courtney Orlando. Did he go by another name? Like, did he do music? JR.
JR, okay. Yeah.
Shout out to JR. I met JR back in 2009 in Tennessee. Okay. And I can't even remember what the award show was called, but I met JR. Yeah. I did an interview. I interviewed him actually back in 2000. Oh, nice. Yeah, for a TV show. People don't even know, man. I've been doing this for a long time. But shout out to JR.
Yeah, no, he's I've never met him, but his wife was awesome. Yeah. Okay. And she just dropped, like I said, this book. And I would definitely recommend it to anybody. We talked last week, and incredible person doing some awesome things. So just wanted to mention that. But so let me go back to this idea of like you were saying, some people assuming that, what you're doing is for speakers, some people assuming that, I don't need to communicate. That's more for people who are outgoing. Yeah. I've always been fascinated by this idea of people who have a type A personality or type B personality, or introverts and extroverts, because, again, coming from the sports world, I always felt like I'm definitely more of an introvert, even though I do this podcast, I'm definitely an introverted person. Okay. But I've always felt like, looking at different athletes or people in any arena of life, like I don't believe that you're only a leader if you're a type A personality. I think you're a leader and you have the ability to lead. Whether you're type A, type B, it just looks different. Like, you may not be the person on stage speaking to everybody, but you're the emphasis on the example that you set is going to be way higher if you're type B, because that's what people are going to see.
Mm-hmm.
And so, do you get any of that from people that you talk to, where, like you said, I'm not a speaker, I don't do any of that. So like, I don't know if I need to communicate effectively, or I'm not constantly communicating. Like, is there ever those introverts that come up to you and it's like, is this really for me? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Let me just pause. I'm gonna answer that question. I just want to say, man, you're asking quality questions.
Thank you,
You're
man.
asking quality questions, man.
I have to, man. I have to. I tell some of our guests that we've had on multiple times over the years that are awesome. Like, you guys are forcing me to be better, because like, I know I can't keep recycling the same stuff with you guys. I got to bring the good questions. So
there you go. So I would say I get that from people, but I don't let them stay there.
I'm with you. Yeah.
Right. I don't let them stay there. Here's what I do. I ask people to, and this is what I'm going to ask your listeners to define everything. Define everything. So you just said a leader. Well, let's define what that means, because what a leader looks like to me can look totally different from what a leader looks like to you, could look totally different from what a leader looks like to Deb, or a leader looks like to my guy and our guy, Kevin Bracey. It can look totally different. And so first we need to define what that means for us. And once we're able to define it, then we can start going down that road of who, what, when, where, why. How do we lead? My grandfather told me a long time ago, some leaders lead from the front and they blaze the trail, and they might have to be vocal, right? Or they might have to be just more, not vocal, but just the doer, right? So you're blazing the trail, you're knocking stuff out the way because you have people behind you. Then there's also the leader who can be in the middle. And this leader in the middle of the pack is pushing the people in front, but also holding on to the people behind to make sure we're all getting to the right place.
Interesting.
Then you can be the leader in the back, who's making sure that nothing is attacking us from behind, and I'm pushing the whole group forward and keeping them going with my voice so they can all hear me. It's very hard to hear someone if you're behind them. Think about me being in the front of a line and somebody being 20 people behind me. It's a little bit more difficult, but if I'm behind you, this thing can project forward, right? And I can tell people what's going on behind us. I can be back there protecting us. I can be pushing where I need to push. So you can find yourself in any area of leadership, no matter if you believe that you're introverted or extroverted. Here's another thing. When people tell me those two things, I say, what does that mean to you? Because some of us just accept labels or put labels upon ourselves without truly understanding what it means to us individually.
Right.
I guarantee, Josh, that there is an introvert that possibly doesn't think about being an introvert like you think about it.
Right.
There might be an introvert who will never do a podcast like this because that's too out there. That's too extroverted. But you're an introvert, but you still are able to do a podcast. Then there are some introverts that I know that will speak in front of 20,000 people, but they're introverts, right? So it all just comes down to, let's go back, that interpersonal communication, your self-talk. What does it mean to you? Yeah. And then once you know what it means to you, then you can start doing the internal work to find out, okay, how do I express it? When do I express it? To whom do I express it? In what fashion do I express it? Maybe I am an introvert and I do want to get my message out there, but maybe I don't want to say anything, right? Okay, well, let me text something, or let me write blogs. Let me jump on medium.com, or let me write books. Or maybe I'm an introvert and I do want to be present on social media because I have a message in my heart. I have a story in my heart. Let me just pause real quick. Everybody who's listening has a story to share. So my hope is that you share it because someone needs it. But maybe you're an introvert and you're like, Dwight, I'm not going to get on Instagram and do videos and post videos like you every day, but I'm willing to let my voice be heard. Cool. Let's find a static picture and then just audio record so nobody has to see you visually as you're recording, right? So there's multiple things that you can do to still get your message out there. But again, there's multiple things that you can do if you're an introvert or extrovert. You just need to first define it for yourself.
I love that. We could just stop the podcast right here, but I got a couple more questions for you, so I'm not going to do that.
Yeah, man.
But no, I love that, man. And it kind of popped in my head because I know this is a friend of yours, a local guy, David Garibaldi.
Yeah, right? Man. Yeah.
He's communicating all the time. Now I know there's some speaking elements to what he does, but the bulk of what he does and the main thing that he does is painting, right?
Mm-hmm.
Painting with music. And so every time he does that, he's not even speaking while he's doing that, but his energy, his passion,
Come on,
the colors of the paint, the song he chooses, like all of that is still communicating.
come on, man.
Like you said, there really is no excuse for anybody not to kind of tap into that effective communication, because, whether it's through some kind of art form or whether it's speaking to, like you said, 20,000 people, there's always room to improve. And when we're all doing it somehow, so like, why not get better? Contact Dwight. Just contact Dwight.
Hey, tap in with me. Tap in with me. And here's the thing, right? Shout out to my man DG, David Garibaldi. I'm actually going to be on his podcast coming up very soon. Let me just pause real quick. Man, thank you so much. You are the Connectable Podcast is the first podcast stop on my podcast tour. So we got a number one in here. And I really wanted to do this one because we have such great history when it comes to just knowing each other, but also in the podcast space, but then also what your podcast is about. And I'm all about having conversations that connect, right? And they connect people. But shout out to DG. I'm going to be doing some stuff with him. The crazy thing is this. We're always communicating, period. Like, there's never a time in the day when we're not communicating. Again, we might be communicating with other people or we're communicating with ourselves. There's someone listening right now who's trying to determine if they're going to continue to listen to this guy talk about effective communication and say it a million times, or am I going to fast forward and see if he has anything different? Or am I going to go find the podcast with, who was it? Alexis Smith. Did I get it right?
Alexis Smith.
Yeah. She was dope. So
awesome.
they might decide like, hey, I'm going to stop it right now. Right. But they're communicating something with their decision, even if nobody else is around. So we're always communicating something. So whether you're David Garibaldi and you're doing it with painting, whether it's you who's doing it through podcasts, whether it's me who's doing it through books, we're always communicating. And even the person who says, I'm not doing any of those things. If you are in space with one other person, be mindful of what you're communicating. That's what I want to say. Be very mindful of what you're communicating, because intent doesn't always lead to the impact that you desire. You may intend for something to land a certain way, right? But you may not be having the impact, or the outcome may not be what you thought it was going to be, especially to all my parents out there. I mean, my parents out there, I know you feel me. There are multiple days where I've intended to do the right thing, say the right thing for my kids, and I find out later that, no, I surely didn't take it that way. Me thinking that I didn't let my boys go to a party is me thinking that I'm keeping them safe. Well, they're thinking that, man, you got too many rules and I feel like I'm in jail. Wait a minute. I just totally missed the mark on what I was communicating. And so we're always communicating. So it doesn't matter if you have a stage, a large stage, if you're in the public, your stage is wherever you are.
Right.
If you're in a grocery store, if you're at the gas station, wherever you are, that's your stage. And so just know the end will best receive that communication.
One last question for you, because I meant to ask this earlier, but I forgot and I got distracted. But when you're approaching people and you're approaching, whether it be teachers, leaders, students, I feel like what is super important to your approach to them is the humility. Like, I've never gotten the sense that you're coming at them like, hey, I'm the expert that knows everything. You know nothing. Let me talk to you and pay me to teach you, because like, you need this more than anything else. It's like, no, you've always come off as super, at least as long as I've known you, always very confident. You believe in what you do. You know, you're good at what you do, but you approach it with a humility. And I think that that opens people up to receiving what you have to say. And I feel like that humility and that humbleness is something that's key to communication. But I wanted to get your thoughts on that.
I agree.
Yeah,
I agree. Like for real. Everything you said is 100% true. And one thing that you know about me that maybe your listeners don't know about is that authenticity for me is the greatest thing that I can have in my arsenal.
Yeah.
And for me to be authentic, again, I have to define it because it may be different to someone else. For me to be authentic, I need to be truly the person that I was designed to be. And I was designed to be someone who is caring, someone who is considerate, someone who is courteous, someone who is kind, someone who is loving. And so when I bring those things to a space, I truly believe that people feel that.
Right.
At the same time, I tell people, look, I have not arrived. I never want to arrive, to be honest. That means that I've stopped growing and I've stopped becoming a better version of myself. I stopped learning.
Yeah.
And so I've never arrived. I just want to share with people some things that I've learned along my journey. That's part 2. Part 3, I'm super confident in what I do. Super confident. And I've seen it play out over these 40 years of my life. My grandmother told me recently, she's like, you've been a high level communicator since you were about 5 or 6 years old.
Wow.
So if I go off my grandmother, who is the person who, my grandparents, but my grandmother who knows me the longest, I've been communicating based on her for 35 years at a high level. 35 years has a lot of days in that, Josh. My math is not good. I don't know how many days are in 35 years, but then that means that there's a lot of hours in that. Yeah. Right. I don't know how many hours are in 35 years. There's a mathematician who's listening right now in another state, in another country, that can put that in the YouTube or wherever you put this up. But man, I've been doing this thing at a high level for a long time. And so I've had the opportunity to experience a lot.
Yeah.
And because I've experienced a lot, I can share my experiences with other people. And that's really all I'm doing, is sharing my experiences and hoping it can help someone experience greatness in their world. I want to share one last thing, and then I'll be done, man.
Yeah, please.
For those who are listening to this podcast right now, one, shout out to you for being a listener and a supporter of the Connectable podcast. Number 2, I just want you to know that there's greatness on the inside of you. I didn't get into my motivational piece today, or hopefully this was somewhat motivational for you. Yeah. But I want to remind you that you've been created on purpose, with a purpose, and for a purpose. So, and you're not listening to this by accident. I truly believe that if you're listening to this, then there is at least one other person that needs you to communicate effectively to them, so that that person can even be their best. Again, it's not about us. It starts with us, but it's about other people. And even if you say, Dwight, I don't have anyone else in my world that needs me to communicate with them so that I can be better, I'm going to say, well, then it's you. It's you. You need you to communicate better with yourself so you can be a better version, so that tomorrow, your tomorrow you can say to your today you, thank you. And your next week you can say to this week's you, thank you. And that's the way that I go about things. So I hope that someone caught something today while having this conversation with my man, Josh, that you can start applying today. I'm all about being practical, right? Like, I'm not about giving you fluff. I'm not about giving you things that you can't use right away. These things, just listen to respond and not to react. Listen so that you know how you need to best communicate to that person. You just use that. Use the who, what, when, where, why, how. I guarantee, and I don't make too many guarantees, I guarantee that things will look a lot different in a more positive way if you use those things than if you didn't.
100%. Yeah. And if you were listening to this and you weren't motivated, then you really weren't listening, because there's a lot of motivation.
Talk that talk.
Yeah, man. So before we get out of here, what do you have? What's coming up? What do you got coming up, man?
Yeah. I got some big stuff coming up, but the thing that I wanted to share with your listeners, you all are the first that's going to hear this. I have my online course. That's right. I have an online course dropping soon. By the time you hear this, like as you're hearing this, it's out. And so Josh is going to hopefully put the link in the show notes for you to grab it. If not, just come to my Instagram at Dwight Taylor SR. Click the link. You will see a link to my online course. And the course is called Hacking Your Relationships Like a Pro: Building Bridges Instead of Barriers in All of Your Relationships. So the things that I've talked about, you're going to get it to the max in this course. And again, it's all about practicality. You're going to get some things that you can use right away. I'm not about giving you stuff that is just very high, very feel like it's unattainable. No, I'm giving you stuff that you literally will be able to stop that course after the first 6 minutes and be like, oh, let me go put this to work right now, and you will see results. So I'm very excited about that. I also have some stuff coming up. We're going to be doing more workshops, more courses, more seminars, all these things I'll be sharing with you so that you can share with your listeners. And the last thing that I do want to share is that I got another book coming out.
Oh, all right.
I can't give the title of the book or when, but just know that by the end of this year, I will have another book coming out, and you all heard it first.
I love that. And this is a cool full circle moment, man. Because back when we were recording live in person, I think I made some comment. I'm like, I'm sure you have another book out there somewhere.
Yeah, man.
And you're like, we'll see.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh, and now it finally came around. That book's coming.
It's coming, man. It's coming.
Where are you, if you don't mind me asking, where are you at in the process?
So I'm done with the writing of it. Okay. Yeah. So I'm finished with the writing piece. Right now, we're just trying to figure out how we're going to package it. We have a title. And so we're trying to figure out how we're going to package it. If we're going to be a traditional book, and I would have to define that for you on another day, or is it going to be a workbook? Or will it be more very similar to like my book, Dominate Your Day, both of my books where it's like statements and then stories. So we're trying to figure that piece out, but the writing for it is done, man. It actually has been done since January. So the book has been done since January. We're just really trying to figure out the most effective way to put it out to your listeners and to listeners worldwide.
I love it, man. Well, when it finally drops and you have a release date, we'll have you back on, and we'll chat about that specifically, man.
Yeah, it's fire. I'm telling you right now.
I don't doubt you, man.
I
think anything you put out is fire. So
thank you, brother.
I don't doubt you, man. I love that. So yeah, we definitely want to have you back on. That way we can chat about the book and kind of push people towards that. But in the meantime, where can they follow you? Social media, YouTube, website, all that stuff.
Definitely. You can follow me at DwightTaylorSr.com. That's DwightTaylorSR.com. Also follow me as I continue to grow my nonprofit organization called Our Investment Now. And so you can go to ourinvestmentnow.org. You can find us on Instagram at ThisIsOIN. You can also hit me on Instagram at Dwight Taylor SR. And I'm accessible, man. Holler at Josh. Josh will find me if you're looking for me. Josh will find me. Josh always knows where I am. I'm shooting Josh texts every now and again. So if you can't find me in any other of those places, feel free to just reach out to Josh and he'll connect you with me.
Yeah. And I'm going to say this, not to discourage you guys, but if you can't find Dwight any of those places, you're not trying hard enough. You're not trying hard enough.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. Well, hey, man, we always appreciate your time. We appreciate everything you're doing in the community and beyond. And man, we're just, as always, we're excited for you and can't wait to see where everything is going for you in the near future, man. So thank you so much, man. And we'll talk to you soon.
All good, my man. Thank you for having me. Yes,
appreciate you. Thanks for watching the show. If you enjoyed that episode, make sure you like it, share it, and hit the subscribe button to get a new episode every week. We'll see you next time on the Connectable Podcast.